know who the controllers are, they know you, and they sometimes can relax their radio calls. So one night I'm out getting my night currency, and it's the same kind of scenario. I'm out getting my night currency, and I know it's shift change, so the controller that I'm really good friends with is just about to come on, and I'm in the air. I'm just about to turn base to final and come in for a landing. And so shift change happens, and I turn off my landing light, and I go over the radio, guess who? And he turns off the runway lights and says, guess where? It's like, okay. I guess I'll turn mine back on, please. Do the reciprocal. So anyway, I didn't have a good aviation joke, so I figured a story would be good enough. So this morning, we have with us the chief pilot for Send North. He's a pilot in Alaska, a missionary pilot, going out to a lot of the different villages in a way that seems almost foreign to us here in the lower 48. And so let's go ahead and open up in prayer, and then we'll get Nate Sobie up here. So Father, thank you for people that are on mission with you. Thank you, Father, for giving us people that we can follow them as they follow you. As we learn through Nate's testimony and through his story, I pray that each one of us would see the gifts that you have given us as your means to further the gospel where we are. Father, I pray that we would see missions work not as something that somebody does somewhere else, but Father, that mission work is here at home. Father, I pray that you would show each one of us the mission that you have for us. I pray these things in the name of your mighty Son, Yeshua. Amen. So I'm going to ask Nate to come up, and while he's coming up, I'm going to remind you our theme verse for this month is John 15:15. It says, henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant doesn't know what his Lord is doing, but I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard of my Father I have made known to you. If we are friends of God, then the things that matter to God will matter to us by virtue of God matters to us. So also, we have a command from God later on in John. It says, as the Father sent me, so I send you, in John 20:21. The sent ones are not just those that are across the ocean or those that are on a different part of the continent, but all of us have been sent by God. Do we see that calling? Do we see that each one of us are the sent ones? Do we have that mission? So thanks, Nate, for being here. Let's go ahead and have a seat and get this party started. So let's go into the Batman origin story. How did you and I meet?
Yeah, so we met up in Alaska when you landed your plane up there, face to face for the first time, last summer in August. But we had met earlier. You had reached out to Send International, and a missions coach had been chatting about it. Found out that we had mission aviation in Alaska, and then we were getting a lot of interest in mission aviation in Alaska during that time. So they organized kind of an online interview, storytelling type video chat, I guess. And so we kind of met the first time over that. There were some other young people that were on there. I say young because they were all younger than you.
That's right.
College students and such. But thankfully, something in that conversation sparked an interest, and you came up, and we got to be good friends. In fact, such good friends that so Amos and Kathleen came up for a conference that we have in which all of the Send missionaries get together once a year. And I became deathly ill on the second day of the conference, and I gave to them whatever I had, I believe.
I want to make a correction. You gave it to me.
Gave it to you.
Kathleen escaped unharmed.
So we were sharing some sort of plague while you were up there.
Yeah, that's right.
Been friends since. So.
Yeah, I had to stay a couple of days over. I was not safe to fly home, so that was interesting. So you're a chief pilot for Send North. What are those duties, and what's kind of like your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so Send North is not a mission aviation organization, primarily. It's a disciple-making, church-planting organization, but because of the remoteness of Alaska, we have to use airplanes. 80% of our state is inaccessible by road. And airplane is the mode of transportation. So we have workers in about 14 locations across Alaska and northern Canada. And I get to fly airplanes in and out of these remote villages in support of these church planters and their different locations. And then also to facilitate their ministry if they're sending kids to Bible camp, if they're hosting a get-together from believers in their local area, their local community. They need to all be rounded up by airplane. So, but then a lot of logistics. I do a ton of Costco shopping. Just over the last week, I picked up prescriptions and had them shipped out to other villages and pick up people as they come in from the villages. We had a missionary come in from Kodiak, and he landed, and he doesn't have a car, doesn't have a place to stay, so you go pick him up and travel around, and I put him to work in the hangar with me for a while, and then we're able to give him a place to stay, and so just a lot of logistical support to those that are coming and going from the villages as well.
Yeah. So how did God first begin stirring your heart towards missions? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I first heard the call when I was about 9 years old, and the Lord. And let me just say here, God speaks to children too. His Holy Spirit speaks to kids, and I think often maybe they can even hear His voice clearer than we do as we grow up. And He spoke to my heart. I shared with Sunday school this morning just with the thought, if you do not tell them, how will they know? And I knew, and I heard that so clearly, I knew that He wanted me to be a missionary. I'd grown up hearing stories from missionaries and didn't know where that would take me or what that would look like, but it was just kind of a moment of, if this is what God wants of me, then that's what I want to do. And so that was kind of where the groundwork was laid initially. And then it definitely did not have aviation on my radar during those times. But over time, the Lord just directed my path in different ways, and eventually into aviation, and then eventually to Alaska. I kind of thought initially that when I got into aviation to do missions, I imagined flying over a jungle and dropping like little Bibles on a parachute, into some remote village or something like that. And there's still kind of some places that's pretty rare nowadays. But it definitely has taken on a different shape than anything that I ever imagined, and that's kind of how God is. Like, if you say yes to Him, the path that He will lead you on at times will be very hard, and yet He has promised to never leave us, never forsake us, and to go before us, and so. Yeah, that was kind of where the beginning started, and definitely a long story along the way.
Right. So was there a moment when your skills as a pilot or mechanic became clearly connected to God's mission?
Yeah, I think so. So initially, I thought I wanted to do youth work with troubled youth, and the Lord changed that as I was reading the biography of Nate Saint, a famous missionary pilot, and and I was beginning to recognize that my spiritual gifts that the Lord had built into me were really more on like the service side of things, like the gift of serving. I'm not a great administrator. I could never, see myself pastoring a church or be, just kind of that sort of leadership type person. But I recognized that my heart and desire was coming alongside someone else and helping them to achieve their vision, to be a facilitator, I guess you could say. And as I was reading about mission aviation, and I had never thought about flying before this, I recognized, well, Lord's gifted me with working with my hands. I enjoy doing construction work, and I feel like flying an airplane, I remember the thought coming to me, I could see myself flying an airplane for the Lord. Like, it's a really practical skill that can be used to bring the gospel to these remote places. And that was exciting for me because you don't have to be an extrovert to be a missionary. And believe it or not, I am not an extrovert. I'm an introvert. And I do like to talk as well, but I recognize that the skills that God has given you, the giftings that He has built within you, are for the edification of the church and for the building of His body. And let me just say, what you guys are hearing this morning, this isn't about me. This is about all of us, and asking, God, what is it that you have given me? What are you asking of me at this time? He has called some of us to go, some of us to send, but all of us to be a light in a very, very dark world. And now He has equipped you, He has equipped me, and He's put things in our hand. One of the verses that Nate Saint, that famous missionary pilot, really spoke to him was when, from the burning bush, God asked Moses, what is in your hand? And to recognize, what is the skill that God has given me? What is the giftings? What are the leanings? Like, He has made you with those things for a purpose, for His glory and for the furthering of His kingdom and the building up of His body. And those things will be used by Him when they're held back to Him, as an offering. Lord, here's who you've made me to be. How can I use that for you? It's kind of funny, a little rabbit trail here. I've got a 9-year-old at home, and we were talking about this very thing, like the things that God has given you and gifted you with, how can that be used for His kingdom? And my 9-year-old said, Dad, I'm really good at running. How can I use that for the kingdom? And I loved the heart. He loves to go out and play and run with his friends and sprint around. But that's the heart that we want to have. Like, whatever it is that God has put in your hand, using that for His kingdom. And for me, I recognized that aviation could be. So I didn't already have a pilot's license, and I'm not a mechanic. The joke is that I break them and then mechanics fix it. But recognize that, hey, I feel like this is something the Lord has gifted me with, and the ability to do things more of a physical nature rather than preaching, or that don't come quite as easy for me, and don't feel quite as gifted in that. But something like flying an airplane, I feel like God could really use me in that.
So is there a Bible verse that really spoke to you in connecting aviation and logistics to the Great Commission?
Yeah, so I'd read Nate Saint's biography and began to wonder, Lord, are you calling me into mission aviation to get my pilot's license? And I asked for confirmation just through His word. If this is something that's of you, would you confirm it? And the one day I was reading in the book of Luke, and I came to 22 verse 32, and Jesus was speaking to Peter, and He said, I have prayed for you, because The previous verse says, Satan wants to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that thy faith fail not, and when you're converted, strengthen your brothers. Strengthen your brothers. I thought, that was Peter's call. And then, of course, in the book of John, we see where he said, feed my lambs. That was the call that Peter had, that he was to strengthen his brothers, to feed his lambs. And that's what a missionary pilot does. That's what a support missionary does. And and I looked at that that verse just jumped off the page. And that kind of became a theme for me as I went into mission aviation, that is what God has called me to do, to strengthen my brothers and sisters that are out there serving the Lord through the gift that God has put into my hands, and that I can build up his church with that.
So let me ask you this. What did obedience look like when you first started out?
I think for me, so I went, initially I talked a lot with my pastor and my parents about the call to be a missionary pilot, and they both supported very highly. And so I started my flight training, and I struggled in the area of faith. The idea of even raising support was very scary for me, and so I worked for a number of years, about 4 or 5 years, to earn as much money as I could to try to get me through my flight training. Got me about halfway there. Ended up working at Walmart for years, paying my way through flight school, and some of that came from, I think, a lack of faith. There was an obedience, but yet also a feeling that I kind of had to now do this on my own. God called me to something, and so I've got to make it happen kind of in my own strength. And so it was obedience, but also there was a lot of lessons that needed to be taught along the way. There were really good, exciting moments and times where I saw God's provision in some really cool ways. And then other discouraging. I remember, so I was helping with our kids ministry at our church during that time. And I remember just as I was getting ready to leave for flight school, our pastor, who had really encouraged me early on, came back to me and says, I don't think this is what God has for you. I think you need to stay here and keep working with the kids ministry. And it was kind of a discouraging time because I had felt this call, and he had affirmed it, and my parents had affirmed it, and now he was kind of backing off on that. And it felt like maybe it was partially because he didn't want to lose the children's church minister. And so there were definitely discouraging moments. Thankfully, I have talked with some missionaries where parents were very opposed to and a calling in a child. But thankfully I didn't have that. And let me just say, if there's someone that is feeling a call of God, like, support them. If there's someone, one of your young people, anyone in this church, doesn't have to be young, that's saying, this is ministry God is leading me into, affirm that and walk with them, support them, and send them to do it, even if it's just locally. Really build them up and encourage them in that, because it can be a lonely road. My friends were buying cars and things like that while I was saving every penny that I possibly could for flight training and things like that. So there were those temptations that want to pull you away. So if you know of someone, if there's someone here that, hey, this is something God's leading me into, pray for them, support them, and walk alongside them, encourage them in it.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of leave this one open and broad, but what does the mission field in Alaska look like, and what does it look like to serve the rural Alaskan villages?
Yeah. So the villages of Alaska is very different than what you see on the brochure. Some of you have probably been on some beautiful cruises. I don't know any Alaska cruise people here. I see. There's a few that have been up, and it's incredible. It's beautiful. Like I said, about 80% of Alaska is off the road system. These are Native American villages that are remote. One of the villages that we fly to on the west coast is, I was just doing some measuring yesterday, and it's the same distance from Anchorage to Hooper Bay as from here to Vancouver, BC. So just a lot of real estate, a lot of places in between. The villages are a lot of different people groups. Mostly English is spoken. There's a few villages very few in which they still speak in the homes, their original native language. But the culture is different. It's Native American culture. They're hunter-gatherers, so they do a lot of hunting, they do a lot of fishing. It's something that they tremendously enjoy. But there's a lot of spiritual darkness as well. There's a history of religion in the state. So Roman Catholicism, Russian Orthodoxy, Episcopalian has taken root in a number of different villages, but in many of those cases it has kind of synchronized a little bit with the former shamanistic religions, and so you'll still even see friends on Facebook will post something along the lines of, I heard the spirit of my dead uncle opening cupboards in my kitchen, and so the priest is coming over to bless the house. Like that's kind of a fairly common thing where you see this synchronization of former beliefs mixed in with the new religion. But no, in a lot of those villages, just a lack of people that are genuine followers of Jesus Christ. And a lot of it is because there's no established church, no established pastor. It's a hard place to follow the Lord when you're so isolated and so alone. Of course, the darkness, alcoholism, and drug abuse is a major issue. There's different types of villages. You've got wet villages in which they can sell alcohol. And then you've got dry villages in which they don't even allow alcohol to come in, and so they make home brew and things you hear about, or they try to smuggle it in. And then there's damp villages where you can bring the alcohol in, but you can't sell it. But there's still, all of the villages are affected by addiction. Highest rates of abuse and suicide in the nation in the Alaskan villages. So Satan is doing everything he can to destroy lives of really, really beautiful people. The culture, there's things about it that just amaze me. You know, if you go out and hunt, it's the elders of the village that you care for first. If you harvest a moose or a caribou, you're going to care for the elders because they are the ones that taught you how to hunt. And they may not be able to do that anymore, but you're going to make sure that they are cared for. So there's things that are just really cool, really beautiful, but also just a need for redemption.
Yeah, so are there villages that have little to no gospel presence?
Yeah, there are. So, unreached people groups are kind of defined as, I don't know if you guys have talked much about that over the last couple of weeks, but when there's like a 2% or less of gospel-believing Christians within a people group, it is not able to reproduce itself. There needs to be outside help come in. And while we would consider the North America to be reached and the people groups of Alaska to be reached, there are villages in which there are no professing evangelical Christians, or no pastor, or just one or two people that are struggling in their faith, trying to walk out a daily Christian life, but having a hard time in a difficult context. There's other villages in which there are thriving churches. We've got some missionaries in the village of McGrath, and God's on the move in that village. There's really cool things happening. We actually there was a missionary couple in which had been working in a village for about 10 years and had seen little fruit. I remember flying the missionary out, and he was all excited because there was a young man that he was discipling, one, in this village. And it was fruit. And he was so excited to have someone that was interested in the gospel. And this young man, I remember the missionary telling me, saying he's reading his Bible on his own. Huge, huge victory in this village. And eventually that guy moved out, and they were struggling, and they began to recognize that they needed to get healthy themselves. They were having just some burnout issues. And so they moved to the village of McGrath as well, and joined up with what God's doing there, just to kind of be able to strengthen themselves once again for the task at hand. So you have places like McGrath, places like this other village in which there was nobody walking with the Lord. And the hope is that someday someone will go back to that village. But they had a gospel presence for about 10 years that was just not received.
So what was the moment that broke your heart when you realized that mission aviation in Alaska was really what God was calling you to?
Yeah, so I was flying for an air taxi. So there's all of these villages only connecting by air. And so I was flying commercially in a small airplane, seats about 10 people. And as I was going to these villages and becoming friends with people in these villages, flying them around, my heart and my wife's heart began to just be burdened and recognize that this was the place God was calling us. This was the people that He was helping us to love and building a heart of love and a burden for in our hearts. And a lot of it was different experiences I had in many of those villages. So many stories I could tell. In fact, when we did decide, I remember one thing. I think I was telling you this story last night, but there was a lady in a village, found out that we were joining a mission organization, and she said, "Do you guys have someone that can come and pastor a church in our village? There's no one here that can shepherd us." And just hearing stories like that of a lady that wanted fellowship and wanted someone to shepherd her and to teach and to disciple, but no one there. We had, where we were living in the village of Port Allsworth, there were some nearby villages. There was a village called Pedro Bay, the most beautiful place you ever seen, in which there was a group of believers there, but they had no pastor. And so a group of us would often get in an airplane and fly over there, and we might bring a guitar, and one of us would open the Word and share some thoughts. And this little group of believers that were there, and this was a village of like 50 people, like almost no, but they had this little church of probably half the village attended. They were so hungry, and they would just soak it in, and they would beg us to come back and just want someone to shepherd and want someone to be there. They're still waiting for a pastor in that village. There's just the need is so great and the workers are few. And so all of these different things, we had young people in our homes and began to hear their stories. Some of them, most of them were incredibly tragic. But to be able to love someone, to walk beside them as they were going through trauma and difficulty, and recognize that there are people that go, and that I have been given this skill in flying an airplane that can help make their going possible and help bring them in. My wife's grandparents flew in by float plane to a village years and years ago, before there was even airstrips, to bring the gospel to the village of Graveling. And there's still a church there. And went out to these remote areas and just seeing, wow, this is a skill that I have, that I can be used. I don't need to go drop Bibles in some remote jungle. The gospel is needed here, and I've got what the Lord has given me, something put in my hand, that shepherd staff of a pilot's license, so to speak, to be able to facilitate it for others.
So can you share a moment when aviation directly impacted the ministry work on the ground?
Yes, yeah. So one of my favorite stories, this was about 2 years ago maybe now. So there's a family living in Village A, we'll call it, and they have adopted a number of children. They've got 4 boys that they've adopted from villages. And a lot of times you'll have a teen mom that is expecting a baby and is not able to raise, and she's looking for a good home. And here's a beautiful family that loves Jesus, and so they've adopted a number of boys. So he reached out to me and asked if I could help, because they found out that the birth mom of one of their sons had taken her own life. And she's in another village, and the village is not super far away, but in order to get out, they've got to go from Village A to Fairbanks on an expensive small plane, and then get on Alaska Airlines and come down to Anchorage, and then get on another airplane and go out to Bethel, and then get on another small airplane and go to this other village, and then make the whole reverse trek. It would be thousands of dollars for their family, multiple days. They'd have to overnight in some of these locations, and so he called me up and said, "Can you help?" And I said, "Absolutely. Send me a shopping list." And what's that all about? So it's very expensive to ship food and everything out to these villages. So what I did was I filled up the plane with groceries for him and his family, and I flew out to their village, about a 2-hour flight. We dropped off all the groceries, loaded up his family, and an hour and a half later, we were in the village that they were trying to get to. Just a direct flight. And we overnighted there, and the family and the community that was just hurting and struggling was so amazed that this family had come and had brought the children with them. They became the guest of honor that weekend during the funeral. They had the potluck afterward, and they were the ones that were told to go first, which is a huge honor that would normally be reserved for like the parents of the one who had passed away, the elders. But they were told, you need to go first. You are the guests of honor. You have brought our family back to us for this moment in which we are hurting. And in those moments, I'm prayer support. So I don't really know people in the village, so I take a step back and just pray and pray and pray for those missionaries and all the interactions that they're having. And the next day we loaded the plane up, and an hour and a half later we were back in their home village, and then I flew home with an empty airplane. and things like that. There's ministry that would not happen without the use of an airplane, that you just would have to say no to because logistically it's impossible. So that's one of many, but one of my favorites, because it was really cool to see.
So let's pivot a little bit. Now, I'm going to use some words that this congregation isn't familiar with, but what is Project Caribou? What's that all about?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've started recently is Project Caribou in Alaska. There's some pamphlets and stuff on the back table. So up in Alaska, we've got moose. And the moose are solitary creatures. You got some of those here as well, so you kind of know they are grumpy, and spiritually we don't want to be moose. Living by ourselves, isolating. We want to travel. God has created us for community and to work together as a body. And so we started Project Caribou because that's something we understand up in Alaska. The caribou find their strength in numbers, and they run in herds. And we see that, like the couple I mentioned earlier, you can put a missionary in a village, and it's hard work, and you feel isolated, and there may not be other believers in your village, and you're staying connected with your team, but your team may be 50 or even 100 miles away, and you're making phone calls. It's just hard. But in the places like McGrath, where there is a team and working together, we find that the church thrives. And it's kind of how God meant it to be. He sent his disciples out in groups. And then Paul always traveled in a group, and when he always had companions, whether it was Timothy or Titus or whoever it was, Silas, he always traveled to find his strength with his herd, so to speak. So we started Project Caribou, which puts kind of a core nucleus of long-term missionaries in a location, and especially we're focusing on these hub villages, which is, there's normally a little more infrastructure. There's often a few churches. There's a runway. There might be a restaurant and a store, a couple thousand people. So there's a little bit more infrastructure in these villages. But then there's a whole bunch of satellite villages that are accessible by airplane that are within reach of that village. And that service, the hub village services those. So we put kind of a nucleus part of the herd in that these are people that stay and do ministry and live in the community and help mobilize the local church to reach their community and those outlying villages. And then it's also a landing place for short-term missions, whether they're coming up for a year or for 2 years or even for a month. They can have the capacity to host whoever's coming in, and hopefully those people will hear the call as well and pursue long-term missions in Alaska. But it's a group effort to reach a community and then to go out from there into the surrounding satellite villages. It's pretty exciting. Right now our hub is in the village of Dillingham. It's a fishing hub out on Bristol Bay. And we've got a young couple with a couple kids and a single guy. And then we've had some interns that go out there, and they're engaging in the community. The husband is doing, he's the basketball coach, the junior high basketball coach in the community. So he's engaging, and that also allows him to travel to those other satellite villages, because the basketball teams all fly by airplane and go and play basketball. And so he's rubbing shoulders with and getting to know the students, but then also running youth group and connecting with people in the villages. And also, one of the church members in that village actually reached out to me just over the last week. He's a pilot, and he said, what if I buy this airplane? I'm thinking about our team needs to get their own airplane. And so we've been praying for a pilot to fly a plane, and there's been a lot of interest. And that was kind of how we met, was talking about getting a missionary pilot in this hub village. So our team there is working with the local church to mobilize them to reach their community, which is kind of what's happening here, right? You know, you guys are, how is God going to use me? What do I have that can reach my community for Christ? And those within the local area, but also those surrounding satellite villages, in our case, going to the ends of the earth or wherever it might be.
What happens spiritually? I'm going to pivot kind of back a little bit. What happens spiritually to those villages that don't have any kind of a gospel influence?
I think it's not hard to imagine just the spiritual darkness that is there. A single candle on a very dark night can be seen from almost a mile away. Wow. And when there is no light in those places where the darkness is great, the enemy wreaks havoc in the hearts, and especially in young people. And to hear the stories of those that have struggled with suicidal thoughts and depression and abuse. But then to flip that of when the gospel, when a light comes in, that light is so much brighter because of how dark the night is. There's a village in which we have a family serving. When they hear that there's going to be a drinking party, and that's when a lot of the abuse happens to the children in the village, they will open up their home and they'll have a big sleepover, and they'll invite all the kids and the young people over, and they'll sing songs and play games and share the gospel, tell Bible stories, things like that. And they just have created this place of safety in which normally would be a place of fear and dread and destruction in the lives of these young kids. And so that happens and continues to happen in these isolated communities when there is no gospel presence. But when someone is there and able to share the light of Christ and be a light for Christ, there's a safe place to go. And story after story of missionaries that I've heard that have had that young person knock on their door and said, "Can I spend the night here tonight? My home is not a safe place right now." And one missionary that I know talks about, he woke up in the middle of the night and needed to go out and get a drink, and he was stepping over the sleeping bodies of people that had filled his home, the young people of the community that had come in because they needed a safe place to go. And he didn't even know that they were there, but he never locked his door because it was always going to be a safe place for people to go.
So I want to kind of pivot back to aviation. Is there a story or a time that you can think back where you were on a flight and God miraculously showed up and saved your flight, saved your airplane?
Yeah, there is some really cool. So actually just last year I had a really interesting, I have seen God's hand over and over to the point I have seen him move weather in such miraculous ways that if the weather is really bad and I can't fly, it just doesn't even stress me out. I know the flight's not supposed to happen because I've seen the weather maker do some pretty amazing things. But we had a flight last spring. There was a family conference at a Bible camp in a village. It's a fly-in village, and I flew out, picked up a bunch of people from a number of different villages and flew them to the camp. And then I stuck around and went and flew them all back home. And on my way back to Anchorage, I started to see some engine indications that were not normal, but they were also kind of weird. And so it's like, I think it could be just the gauge. I think I don't know for sure that there's anything wrong. And I'm just by myself in the plane. By this point, everybody had been delivered back to their villages. And I'm in descent into Anchorage, and the indication's getting worse. It's getting worse, and I land, and come to find out that my turbo was going out, and the oil there was one little drop on the bottom of the dipstick. And had I been way out in the middle of nowhere, there could have been just a pretty big emergency, or the plane could have been stuck out in a village in which we are sending engine components, and trying to change them out in the village does not work very well. And so here I am back at home, and we pulled it into the hangar, and we took the part off and shipped it out and got a new one and put it back on. And there was nothing, and the plane had, through the whole weekend, had run perfectly smooth and not a hiccup, and everyone went to camp, everyone went back, and it was just on that very last leg, coming back to home base, that it happened. And thanking the Lord for things like that, safety. Had another flight last year. So one of the major disasters that can befall a pilot is icing, in which a plane ices over. And that's why if you've ever been on a commercial flight in which they spray it off, like, it's a big deal. You got to be very careful. So I was in a village and was getting ready to leave. I checked weather, everything looked good. And so we launched. I had a missionary and an intern with me, and we had been visiting another missionary. And on our way out, I'm flying along, and the weather is starting to move in, and I'm listening to the radio, and on both sides of my route, all behind me, guys are popping up with, hey, we're experiencing moderate icing. And a few minutes later, we're experiencing moderate icing, which is not good. And yet we never encountered it. We went right in both, when we landed, I showed my passengers, here's our line, here are the reports that people were saying they were getting this moderate icing, and it never touched us. And the flight happened without a hitch. And so things like that you see, that you know that God is with you. So it's pretty cool. We serve a God who falls asleep in the front of a boat out on the storm, right? So those kind of things don't scare him at all.
That's right. So what has God taught you personally through serving in Alaska?
Oh, man, there's so much. I think one of the big things was just his provision. And when we first joined missions, and maybe God is beginning to nudge your heart for something, and you're kind of wondering about that side of it. Will God provide? Will I have what I need? Can I make this happen? So I had been working commercially and making decent money, and flying every day. And now the Lord is calling us into missions. And I remember having this thought. And it went something like this. Well, I've been providing for my family for these years, and now I really need to trust the Lord to provide for us. And the Lord just kind of gently smacked me upside the head and said, wait a minute, you were providing for your family? No, I was providing for your family, and I'm not going to stop providing for your family, and nothing is going to change. I am going to walk with you through every step of this, and who I call, I provide for. Who I call, I equip. And not only that, I'm going to invite a whole bunch of people to be a part of this with you. It's no longer going to be just about you punching a time card. I'm going to invite people to join in and to send you and to support you and to pray for you. And no longer are you doing this on your own. Now you've got this army with you of people that are going to go through this with you. And, oh man, boy, was that kind of an eye-opener that he was taking care of me all along the way, and yet he needed to kind of shift my focus. I think another one that really has helped me, when we got into it, I realized that the need that's out there is never ending and is bottomless. And there is always more work to be done. And even Jesus took time to get away with the Father. The crowds are pressing in, they're asking him to heal, and yet he would go away to be with the Father. And that there are rhythms that he has built us to have a need for, and Sabbath is one of those that I told my wife, Teresa, I said, I don't want to do this for just a few years and burn out. I want to be in this for the long run. And if that means saying no sometimes, and let me tell you what, when you are serving in a support role like we are, saying no to missionaries hurts. Like, it's really bad when someone says, can you do this on this day? And recognize that is going to encroach on that margin that God has asked us to put into our life. And so we have chosen to set aside time to rest, to Sabbath, to have time with our family, to make sure that my kids have their dad around. I don't want to, they're our number one mission field, and raising and discipling them, our three kids, I don't want them to grow up and say, Dad wasn't around because he was off on the mission field somewhere. I want them to know that I was a part of their life. And so that was another big lesson that God has taught us and kind of continues to teach us, because especially in the summers it gets really busy and it's easy to kind of go into that go mode and string together a couple 12-hour days, and all of a sudden you're working from a place of fatigue and you're just plowing forward, and that's not sustainable over a long time. I want to do this for years and years and years. And so that means following the example that the Lord Jesus provided us and getting away with the Father, getting some rest.
So, a final question. Is there a time that you needed to be reminded that this was all worth it, that maybe you were feeling discouraged and needed that little pick-me-up from either a praying church that was praying along with side of you, or is there a moment that you can think of that was like, yeah, I needed that?
I would say it's kind of something that you have to be reminded of fairly often. And one thing, I have a picture that I made. It's kind of a goofy picture, excuse me, that I did with an AI. I just typed some stuff into like one of these little AI things, and it came up with this picture. But it's a group of people, and they've got an airplane on their shoulders, and they're carrying the airplane. And it's something that I shared with a church that supports and prays for our family, that this isn't just us, that this is it's not just my family, but it's so much bigger. There's an army of people that are supporting and caring and praying for us, and that are a part of this mission. And when I look at that picture, it reminds me that I may be on the controls of the airplane, but I represent really hundreds of people. And a lot of them might say, I might never be able to go to Alaska to be a missionary pilot. I might never be able to go to South America and work in an orphanage. I might never be able to go and do whatever. But I can send someone else to do it, and I can pray for someone else to do that. And the moments that we've gotten encouragement from people that said, hey, I am praying for you. I see you. I know what you're going through. Just know that we are praying for you. I've got a guy that reminds me pretty often. He says, I pray for you on the first day of every month. That's the day I pray for you. And that we focus on prayer for you. Things like that you hear about, that individual will never fly a plane in Alaska, but he is just as much a part of the team. And what I do what my wife does, what we do can't be done without those prayers surrounding us and uplifting us. So encourage those missionaries that you know. Let them know you're praying for them, because they do get discouraged. There are difficult days. There are times in which they're fatigued. And burnout can be a very real thing. And just that love and that support that you give to them really means a lot.
Thank you so much, Nate.
Yeah. Thank you guys for letting me be here. And just the fact that I could come down here and share this with you. You guys don't know me, putting a lot of trust. He knows me a little bit, but not even a lot. And so thank you. And let me just extend an invitation. Any of you come to Alaska, reach out. We would love to host you. My wife is an amazing cook. We have
I can attest.
Freezer full of salmon. She makes great salmon. So come on up. Just let me extend the invitation. We'd love to get to know you guys if you ever make the trip.
So, thank you. So let's go ahead and close out our time in prayer this morning.
And can I pray for you guys as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I'll let you go first.
Okay. Well, Father, I just thank you for this body of believers and the journey that you are calling them on right now. Lord, I believe that there's people in this very congregation here that are hearing your Spirit speak to their hearts about ways that they can engage with those that don't know you. I believe that there are even young people here today that may be hearing the call to go. Lord, I just want to pray that you would equip and empower this group just in amazing ways, that they would see your provision, that you would put your ideas in their head, and that they would support and love one another. Lord, just grow their burden for the lost around the world. I pray, Lord, that there would be a myriad of people worshiping around your throne because of the ministry of this church. That hear the gospel, that see it lived out every day in the lives of these people, that see the gospel not just preached but walked every day, and that want that for themselves. Lord, I pray that you would then equip and empower and provide for them in those ways. And Lord, that you would hinder the enemy from anything that he would do to draw them away from that. Lord, we know that our enemy is conniving and has schemes and is a distractor and a liar. But we know that greater is he that lives within us than he that's in the world. And that nothing that the enemy does would come to pass, but that you would protect the hearts of this church, the people in it, to take your gospel and to be goers and to be senders. That whatever you have placed in their hand, whatever gifts you have given them, whatever skills, whatever calling, whatever spiritual gifts that they have, would be used for the building up of your church and for the bringing of new souls into your family, the people that you love and died for. Bless them in the name of Christ. Amen.
Thank you so much, Nate.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
So I'm going to ask Steve and the worship team to come down. And while they're making their way down, each year we do VBS, so for the last couple of years anyways. We've done Vacation Bible School for the kids, and part of that week, the kids raise money for missionary work. This year, I'm making the executive decision that money will go to Nate Sobie. That way, our church knows the missionary work that we're going to support, and that we have a connection to the mission work going to be done with those funds. So, Brother Steve.